Udine, Friuli, the peripheries of the world. Different places united by a single thread, the charity of Father Luigi Scrosoppi and his faith in Providence. Not a figure of the past, but a living presence. Let us retrace together the path of this humble Friulian priest who became a saint of charity in the Universal Church.
Everything begins in 1798, when Father Gaetano Salamoni of the Oratory of St. Philip Neri joins the community of Udine, a refugee from Mantua, where Napoleon had dissolved all religious communities. In Udine too, as in his own land, the disastrous effects of wars and epidemics have sown destruction and death, and Father Gaetano watches with dismay as numerous abandoned girls and young women wander the city streets, deprived of hope and a future. He then makes the decision to establish a house for the destitute, Casa della Derelite, in Udine as well, modeled after one he saw in Verona and whose existence he knew of in Milan and other cities.
The difficulties seem insurmountable, but his trust in Providence is unshakable. And in 1816, he succeeds in opening the first house for the destitute. At his side, from the very first moment, are some noble ladies of Udine, but soon he is joined by the young priest, Father Carlo Filofero.
The Filofero family, owners of some mines in Malboghetto, is forced to abandon their homeland and assets in 1797. Before the advance of Napoleon Bonaparte's troops, and arrives in Klagenfurt as refugees. In 1800, Francesco dies unexpectedly, and Antonia returns to Udine to her sister Rosa, who welcomes her along with her 14-year-old son Carlo. The early loss of Father Francesco and Mother Antonia's return to Udine, her hometown, deeply mark Father Carlo, who chooses the path of the priesthood. Antonia is a woman of great faith. She accepts the trial from God, distinguishing herself in relieving and helping the poor of the city. In the same building on Via Canciani, where she lives with her sister Rosa, Domenico Scrosoppi resides. Much younger than her, Domenico is attracted by her human qualities, falls in love, and asks for her hand in marriage. 2 sons are born from their union, Giovanni Battista in 1803 and Luigi in 1804.
Carlo continues his studies in the seminary. In 1806, he enters the congregation of the Oratory of St. Philip Neri, and in 1809 is ordained a priest. At the oratory, he meets Father Gaetano. A deep friendship is born between them, shared in the priesthood and in love for the poor. In 1822, when Father Gaetano retires to Padua due to his advanced age, Carlo takes up his legacy, becoming director of the House for the Destitute.
The faith lived at home, and Carlo's example exerted deep influence on Giovanni and Luigi. And to Mother Antonia's great joy, the 2 younger brothers also choose the path of the priesthood. Luigi, still a student, begins to frequent the house for the destitute as a catechist and youth leader. He becomes a priest in 1827 and, after an initial period dedicated to preaching, accepts the role of vice director. His collaboration proves surprising from the start. The economic situation of the house, however, is dramatic, to the point of raising fears of a definitive closure. Monsignor Guillermo Biasuti, in his biography, recounts the resolute reasoning Luigi addressed to his brother Carlo in that moment of crisis.
It is not practical to wait for offerings to arrive when they choose. We must go and look for them. The girls are hungry every day, And for this, we need a seeker who puts his whole soul into the begging and who knocks without fear at the doors of the palaces, the houses, the shops of Udine, and the peasants in the Friulian countryside.
The outcome of that project is still testified to today by Father Carlo's accounting ledger. For a young man from Udine's elite, knocking from door to door in the guise of a beggar was a sacrifice that went beyond mere physical fatigue. Monsignor Biasuti writes, Father Luigi had taken the words of the gospel seriously. I was hungry and you gave me to eat. He truly saw Jesus in his orphaned girls, and such a vision compensated him for the bitter salt of refused or poorly offered alms and the hard climbing up and down stairs, often only to find doors closed.
That knocking at the doors and at the heart of God and men became the hallmark of his holiness, a holiness founded on a precise spiritual program that he defined as a young man, holy affections and practices, and which he sealed years later in his resolutions of 1852. On this path, he radically adheres to the third degree of humility of St. Ignatius of Loyola, the same ideal of poverty and annihilation embraced by the greatest saints, starting with St. Francis of Assisi.
I must not only esteem and love poverty, humility, and suffering, but I shall desire these three virtues, to practice them and to desire them as the highest good and my portion. I shall hold myself as a servant in the congregation of my father Saint Philip, and as a servant also in the house of Providence of the Holy Father Gaetano. I shall visit the sick and the poor, holding myself also as a servant among them.
Let us now try to grasp how he testified to these values in his life. Humility. He lives and collaborates alongside his brother Carlo, almost in the shadows, without seeking recognition or rewards. When the Austrian government grants a gold medal to Father Carlo for the charity work initiated, Don Luigi rejoices together with the entire family of the destitute. To give a future to the work, he founds a new congregation with young collaborators. After Father Carlo's death, he writes the rules and obtains recognition from Rome, but never accepts being called founder. When asked about it, he answers with simplicity. "Oh no, I was not the founder. I only helped the work of my brothers." For the construction of the new house, he did not hesitate to go around personally with a cart to beg for materials and to put himself at the service of the masons as a humble laborer. It was this spirit of humility and service that allowed the growth of the family of the destitute, reaching 60 orphans and 20 sisters, a number that grew significantly under his direction after Father Carlo's death. He did not want to leave any writing about himself, although in his letters to the sisters, of whom he was a master and guide, it is possible to grasp his spiritual greatness. He avoids showing off on public occasions. The sisters remember how on the occasion of the inauguration of new activities, he would prepare everything only to disappear, leaving it to them to share the joy and gratitude of the people being helped. Humility translated for him into daily gestures, lived with deep dedication, taking care of his own clothes and shoes with sobriety, personally taking care of cleaning the floors, tidying up the beds, cleaning combs, chamber pots, and nightstands. He never wanted to be photographed. Not even when, on his deathbed, the sisters strove to have a memento of his person. To remain in the shadows even after his passing, he arranged to be buried in Orzano, far from the noises and the gaze of the city. The glory had to belong only to God, for he believed he had done nothing more than his duty.
Poverty. His model of reference was Jesus Christ, who, regarding poverty, chose to be born in a stable. His room was reduced to the essentials: a bed with a sack of corn husks, a desk, and a wardrobe full of books. His clothing was also very poor, with shoes and clothes patched to the unbelievable. Yet, when he received new items as gifts, he joyfully destined them for needy young seminarians. For this, which he called holy poverty, he did not want the new house to be plastered on the outside, like all the poorest houses of the time. In the last year of his life, he stripped himself of every possession, which, combined with his brother's inheritance, was entirely donated to support the destitute girls, the poor of the city, and the works of the Udine church. He lived his last days in the house, asking to be treated like the last of his orphans.
Sacrifice. Why aspire to sacrifice? Can this be a value? Jesus accepted the incarnation, and to fulfill the mandate of salvation, tested his humanity in the sacrifice of the desert, and did not draw back before the whip, the crown of thorns, and the cross. Saint Luigi, following his example, saw in sacrifice the way to unite himself to that design of redemption. For this, he spent long hours in prayer, kneeling before the crucifix. He performed penances to repair every slightest shortcoming. He lived and worked alongside Jesus, whom he recognized in the poor. Visiting them in hospitals, he would wash and kiss their feet, teaching the sisters to do the same. He never spared himself, despite fatigue and illness. Even in his last days, gravely ill, he refused to stay in bed, repeating, "Too many chores to do to give importance to this little ailment." His last illness was very painful. By then, unable to get up and covered in sores, looking at the crucifix, he would repeat, "Thank you, Lord, because you have humbled me." His humility exerted a strong fascination on the sisters and young guests, who grew up serene, responsible, and confident in the future. Charity, he used to say, is the flower of humility. The spiritual testament he left to his daughters and to the world is engraved indelibly on his urn. Charity, charity, save souls and save them with charity. A charity that has the goal of saving the whole man, helping him to live and realize his human and spiritual values, healing him in his wounds, but above all, communicating to him the salvation that Jesus came to bring.
The no in Father Luigi's vocabulary was reserved only for personal gain, privileges, and situations of sin. But when the poor were involved, the only possible word was yes, regardless of what this might entail. Many times, the sisters who were by his side did not understand these yeses, often given without even having an idea of how to fulfill them. But he trusted in prayer and in providence. And if, after having done everything possible, the result was not reached, he knew that God would forgive him. Something not possible if his answer had been no.
Besides the Orzano estate, purchased to bring the convalescent girls there, but above all to produce wheat, corn, and everything that could contribute to the support of the Udine house. Step by step, before his death, he realized another 11 works of charity: kindergartens, schools, shelters and hospitals, and other structures for the poor, scattered throughout Friuli, Trentino, and Istria.
The first work that crossed the borders of Friuli to gradually turn its gaze to the world was the hospital with an attached school in Primiero in 1866. In the mid-19th century, undertaking a journey from Udine to Trento was an enterprise, but even more implausible was reaching Primiero from Trento. It took 3 hours by carriage to travel just the 20 kilometers from Trento to Levico, and a whole day to climb up to Primiero, proceeding mostly on muleback among the rugged Dolomites.
However, what makes this experience truly unique is the courageous journey of the sisters, who faced those mountain passes on muleback.
Madre, guardi, siamo proprio sospese tra il cielo e la terra.
Ci protegga la benedizione di padre Luigi.
Stia tranquilla, madre, con noi siete in mani sicure.
Acte plurimorum fratrum nostrorum consilia, beatos Aloysium Scrosoppi.
The last great sign of His Holiness is that worked through his daughters, the Sisters of Providence. After Father Luigi's death in 1884, the seed planted in Udine expanded like a flourishing plant, bringing his charisma everywhere. The history of this expansion is marked by fundamental stages that testify to its universal vocation. After the first step in Italy in 1837, in 1927 the work reached South America, followed in 1973 by Africa, and in 1977 by Asia. Today, those 12 initial houses have multiplied into a charitable network that embraces the entire world. The Sisters of Providence have continued to meet Christ in the least of these, responding to the poverties of every age, testifying that charity has no borders and that the virtue of Father Luigi's sacrifice is a sap that does not stop flowing, renewing itself continuously in every corner of the earth.
Father Luigi's holiness was not a solitary path. From 1816 to 1884, laity and benefactors were the beating heart of his mission, the living providence that Luigi prayed to and loved, and which allowed his works to grow. Today, this communion continues between the Sisters of Providence and volunteers around the world.
Prima di tutto, un applauso a tutte le parrocchie che hanno abbracciato questa iniziativa.
It is not just about material support, but about looking at our brothers and sisters with the saint's eyes, infusing his style of charity into every project. In this synergy, the work of Father Luigi and his spiritual daughters remains a courageous response to the poverties of the time.
Da quasi 11 anni ormai, dal 2014 quando ho conosciuto la realtà a Scampia, la missione che hanno a Scampia.
The congregation founded by Father Luigi has drawn vital sap since its origins from the generosity of the Friulian and Italian people. A tree whose deep and solid roots have allowed the canopy to extend far beyond the borders, bringing fruits of charity everywhere thanks to the tireless dedication of sisters and laity. Today, faced with a rapidly changing world, the challenge is to guard this heritage, vivifying it with the same gaze as the founder. How would Father Luigi face the difficulties of the present time today? To find answers consistent with our history, we must return to the source. The biography by Monsignor Guglielmo Biasati offers us a deep key to understanding his humanity and the courageous choices that guided the congregation through the storms. For those who wish to discover how Father Luigi's legacy can still indicate the way today, Biasati's entire work is available for free in 5 languages and in digital format on the official website www.amicipl.it.